Right. So again, happy Monday to everyone. What I'd like to do is I actually just want to go around the group and just do like a quick 1 minute introduction of each other. I'd like to just say what you hope to get out of the Faith and Finances program. So I'm gonna just go and pick you as I see you on my screen here. But first up, I see Susan.
Good morning. I am a volunteer. I'm a retired registered nurse from Cincinnati, Ohio. And our church has a benevolent food pantry and a clothing pantry with no strings attached. And we have been trying to help educate those people that are in poverty and need help. So we started this program in the fall before Christmas. We did have a faith and finance class for them. We only had 2 people. It went all right, but we were a little disappointed. So we're hoping that we can kick it up a notch.
Fantastic. Well, we're glad you're here, Susan. And I'm excited to hear that you've at least tried this program before and you have experience. Also, quick question. Are you a Bengals fan, Susan?
Oh, yes.
All right.
We're
So you're
ready for
excited.
Sunday.
All right. Thank you, Susan. Tasha, I see you on our screen next.
Good morning. My name is Tasha Johnson. I work in banking right now, and I do a lot of community work in Lubbock, Texas. So I work with Lubbock Impact, which helps with the homeless and just different people in different avenues. And so they wanted me to take this class so that I can be certified to teach finance and faith and finance at Lubbock Impact and different nonprofits that I work with.
Fantastic. And what's your little one's name?
Her name is Araya.
Araya. Hey, sweet girl.
So I have a 14-year-old and a 6-month. So one will be graduating high school and the other one will be going to pre-K. So I actually started over.
All right. Well, thank you for being here, Tasha. Pastor Anthony, I see you on our screen next.
Yes. Good morning. My name is Anthony Thompson. I'm a candidacy for elder in the Methodist Church. And I want to use this program to help me to strengthen my faith and finance throughout my ministry in the Methodist Church.
Fantastic. Thank you, Pastor Anthony. And Julie?
My name is Julie Banks, and I am at the same church as Anthony at Powder Springs First United Methodist. I have been involved in teaching financial stewardship at the church since the early 2000s. But was intrigued about something where, you know, when you're insecure in food and housing, you know, some of the stuff in the other classes I've taught really are just out there. So, you know, looking forward to having ways that will help. And we have a community pickup for, there are some food items, non-food items that takes place on Thursdays, and Anthony, it's what, 90 families or so that come by weekly.
Yes.
And we are really hoping to be able to plug in with them and help them, you know, kind of get out of the poverty. I enjoyed the video on poverty in the Get Started stuff.
Yeah. And thank you, Julie. I think those videos, I think Chalmers does a fantastic job on all these short intro videos. Not very long, but they're super deep and informative all the way around. So I'm glad you enjoyed that. By the way, you will often hear me say this in our financial literacy work, that you can't necessarily budget out of poverty, right? If expenses exceed income, there's not much you can do to budget out of that. And so either you reduce expenses, and oftentimes that's not a reality for folks. So we need to find ways to increase income. But I would say that I would define that out of the scope of financial literacy, and more so now we're looking at like job readiness training. We're looking at entrepreneurship or other ways to do that, but another topic for another day. So, but I'm glad you brought that up here, Julie. So thank you. Bonnie, I see you on our screen next.
Dean, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Yeah, I am an ordained elder in the Church of the Nazarene, and I'm also the administrative director for the Compass Initiative, which is our national initiative to help pastors be more financially literate themselves and get out of debt and things like that.
Fantastic.
So I'm hoping, I'm kind of evaluating this to see if this might be a good tool for us to use with the pastors.
Fantastic. Thank you for being here, Bonnie. And Steve, I see you on our screen next.
Yeah, hello. What a fine cohort you've gathered, Carlos. I've gone to stop video because I think I have some bandwidth issues on my end, so hopefully it won't interrupt. My day job is as a COO, CFO of a seminary, Southern Evangelical Seminary in Charlotte, where we want to equip leaders to contend for the historic Christian faith. But my avocational interest as a volunteer executive director of something called Pathways Innovation in Greensboro, North Carolina. We are creating with the help of a lot of our minority leaders here in town, we are creating a micro bank, a micro fund, and there are a lot of wonderful mentoring groups that are graduating 16, 18-year-old young ladies and men who are ready for the next vocationally, but are not necessarily college ready or job ready. And so we're trying to be a bridge. It looks like my internet might be unstable still, but we're trying to be a bridge and a catalyst to provide vocational lending for tools and vocational training. But I'm thinking of, not only do I want to become wiser in this field, because When Helping Hurts rocked my world about 20 years ago, 15 years ago, and Brian Fickert I've heard speak many times, and so I'm thinking of if I can be helpful at this, want to become maybe we'll require many of our participants age 16 to 18 to take this course with us. That's one of my aims. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Steve. I almost feel like our organizations are very synergistic in what you're talking about here. But, well, I'll share more about the work that we do over time as well. But thank you for being here, Steve. And then Juan Marcos, John Mark.
Hi, everyone. It's great to see you. My name is John Mark Bowers, and I am from the Chalmers Center. I didn't do that on purpose, actually, but what do you know? There's the proof. I am delighted to sit in on this call with you. I am actually one of the original co-creators of Faith and Finances. So it's funny to hear you say, Carlos, 10 years. I'm like, it can't have been that long ago that we started designing this and testing it here in Chattanooga and some low-income neighborhoods where churches and nonprofits that we're connected to are located. But sure enough, we have grown this thing from kind of a backyard grassroots movement into something that's being used nationally all over the country by folks like yourselves. And we're so grateful for that. And we're always learning and iterating on how we do this. So at first we did it all live. You had to come and get trained all in person. Then we moved it to this kind of live online hybrid training. Now then we had an asynchronous version of this course that you're taking now. So we're trying out this coached cohort model, like what you're doing here with Carlos. And so we're always trying to grow and innovate and learn on that. So I'm not here to micromanage. Carlos, you are in such good hands with your facilitator here. But I am just going to be a fly on the wall during your Zoom calls, just learning, listening, evaluating, thinking about how we can make this better for people like you who get certified in the future. So I'll probably turn my camera and mic off if that's all right. You will see the Chalmers Center or my name on some of the calls, but I don't want to act as a facilitator or distract you. It's really just to make the course better. And if you have any questions or concerns about that, you can let us know. But I just want to thank you for taking your time to invest in learning or continuously improving the way you do your work. It's something we so long to do as well in our work. And thank you also for letting me participate and learn along with you.
So thank you, John Mark. It's good to have you here. And again, I've been serving with John Mark. I see J Mark, and I want to call you J Mark, with Mark for almost a decade now. So it's been fantastic to see what the program has been and how it's iterated to what it is now. So thank you all. And again, my name is Carlos Huerta, serve here in Fresno, California. I do attend Midtown Church, which is a vineyard church here in Fresno, California. At the same time, I am the chair of our board and I handle most of our church finances. And again, I think at this point I've overseen maybe the rollout of faith and finances in over 50 different churches, CBOs, and nonprofits and Section 8 housing complexes. And one thing you'll know is that in my signature, if you ever just want to chat about the work that you're going through or want to process, I do have a Calendly link there that you can always throw an appointment on my calendar. And it's a great way to connect. What I do know is through the 6 to 7 weeks of faith and finances, there's going to be topics we're going to be jumping into that for some has been their lived experience or they've been in this world. For others, this is the first time really engaging poverty or financial literacy. And I've had folks over the years who have really struggled with some of the topics and need a space to process. So I do open my calendar to you all if that's something you would like to do. What I would like to do is actually share my screen with you all and show you the Pathright platform. I think I've seen half of you on there already, but for those of you who have not, I do want to walk you through just kind of ease of going through this. But I would ask if you do have any questions, please post those in the chat. We might answer them over time in our call here. But if we don't, then I want to make sure we leave a little bit of time for that. Do you all see my screen?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So by the way, mine's going to look a little bit different than yours, only because I have the teaching option on mine. I will note that each week's coursework will not open until Monday in the morning. So if you're trying to knock it all out at once, that's not something that you're able to do. Really part of the process here is to go week by week and really sit with what we're learning, what we're diving into, what we're exploring, the conversations. I will ask each of y'all, there is in every section at the bottom, like a comment section. And so if you do have questions, post them there. I would also ask if to interact with each other. Right? Some people might share some learnings from that week. Some might share even just examples of the work that they've done in specific areas of learning. And so interaction would be great because it's an online program and we don't get to hang out outside of our weekly calls. That's also a great way to connect with each other. For me, the simplest way to navigate this platform, as you can see on getting started, I have an intro video here for you all. But I also would say, you see these little bubbles up here, or these little arrows. I always say that's the easiest way to navigate through this. You could always go, some people like going back and then opening the next one. I would just say for ease of navigation, to use these little bubbles up here and use the little arrows. You'll see things like these little square boxes. Know that these little boxes open up and add more content to your learning process here. And I think that's pretty straightforward here. Sorry, I skipped one step here. The other thing you will see is there's a little hyperlinks throughout. But again, this is something that you can check. Actually, a digital version of the actual facilitator guide that you would use for the Faith and Finances program. So you can find that online here. And again, I'm going to keep clicking through these arrows. Like I mentioned, you'll have these little boxes that you can open. You have a curriculum overview on week 1. And then I think I see Steve already down here in the conversation. And so, Steve, great job jumping into the forum already. Let's see. And again, excuse me, I skipped the bubble here. So each week is each unit or each little bubble is structured a little bit different. You will have some documents that you can download. I will say that once you have completed this course, you'll always have access to this course. So if 6 months from now, you want to download this downloadable PDF or whatever it is, you can always come back and download that material. So know that this does not go away. There is an optional section each week. Like Steve said, for us in our work here at the seminary at Fresno Pacific University, When Helping Hurts was really transformational for the work that we did and launched our center here. But again, there's small videos. I think somebody mentioned, I think it was, I can't remember who it was, I'm sorry. I think it was Julie that mentioned this video, but about poverty. So there's always these helpful tools that if you have an extra 20 to 30 minutes, I definitely recommend the extra optional section. One thing I would note is that on average, we do have a weekly call that's about 45 minutes to an hour. And then you should be taking anywhere from 2 to 4 hours tops on homework and such. If you're taking a lot longer than that, please reach out to me, because you might be having, you might be doing something wrong or struggling with some of the interface. It should not be taking you maybe longer than 4 hours to do your work. Now, again, some folks can navigate a little bit faster and might not take 2 hours, but just for your own planning purposes, know this is what is going to be required of you. And now I'm to the end of this section, and I'm going to go ahead and jump into week 1. Know that each week we have a weekly Zoom call, so you'll find the Zoom info here. After we're done here, I will send you all a calendar invite for the next 6 weeks. That way you have it in your Outlook calendars as well, or whichever platform you use, but know that you can also enter our Zoom meeting through the platform. Each week, just to talk a little bit about structure. Each week we will have a prayer from a lead trainer across the country. Here's Marcia. Marcia and I have actually co-facilitated a couple trainings like these together when we've had larger groups. And she is a dear friend, and she is in Southern California here with us. You also have a video each week and a reflection question to go along with that. And each week you're going to have content to just dive a little bit deeper into that week's topic. This week I really enjoyed, especially for those of you who are vision casting as to what this may look like in our church, our congregation, our nonprofit, our community. Because I feel like Chalmers does a great job in casting an expectation of who do you need on your team? What do you need? I will say you could run this program on your own, but it would be very difficult to do it all on your own. And so I really would encourage you all, as you read through these job description sections, to think of which other people might come alongside us. Because this isn't simply, hey, get trained in faith and finances and go back and lead a faith and finances course. There's recruiting, there's hospitality, there's securing a room, right? There's childcare, there's food. If you're doing food, there's multiple considerations for the faith and finances program. And I mentioned these now not to scare you all, but to cast a realistic expectation of what it is going to take to pull off a faith and finances course. I think at this point in my life, I think I've done 7 or 8 lead trainer trainings, and I've also facilitated, I believe, 7 actual faith and finances courses. Because of COVID, I haven't done one in the last year and a half, for what it's worth. But having done these courses, I do know what it takes to pull one of these off. Next bubble, again, at the end of each section, as we talk about the structure of each week, you also will have some prayer points for this week. And this is something we really encourage you all to focus on. Set some time aside each week, whether it's in the morning, midday, evening, wherever you find your prayer time, and add these prayer points to your prayer time. And then finally, like I mentioned in the previous section, you'll have an optional section, which I think they're all fantastic. So I really encourage you all, again, take some time to check these out. Just so you know, I will be sending reminders through the week. I'm going to show this to you once, but I actually can see who's logged in and who hasn't. The class has been open for a couple hours, so no shame to anyone. But if I get to next Monday and someone's still at 0%, then there might be a little shame cast on you. But as to now, before I keep going, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. Do I have any questions as to what I've covered so far here?
The weekly calls, I've seen
Oops, sorry, Steve, you cut out there.
several calendar matters, but are they Wednesday, Friday? I'm not sure if that came through. When are the weekly calls?
Yeah, okay. That's a great question, Steve. So because of my scheduling conflict this week, I moved our Wednesday call to Monday. But starting next week, all of you indicated that you wanted a Wednesday morning at 9 a.m. So we will be moving our time back to Wednesdays at 9 a.m. Again,
Or Pacific, right?
Pacific time, excuse me.
So
Yeah, and again, I'll send you all a calendar invite, but that's a great question, Steve. We actually do have a cohort that's running at the same time, but they meet on Fridays. So I think you may have had an option to select Wednesday or Fridays. But that's a great question. Just to clarify, we will meet weekly at 9 a.m. Pacific time on Wednesdays going forward.
Carlos, I have a question.
Go ahead, Bunny.
So our meeting time on Wednesdays, will that be more like discussion so that the materials you just looked at, those are the things we do throughout the week, right?
Yeah, so we'll meet next Wednesday, but we will cover, since we'll be reviewing week 1. Right. And then as some of you may have already jumped into week 2, but we'll cast some vision and ground some of that learning and jump into week 2 for like the latter quarter of the call. But I would say the first 30 to 45 minutes usually is discussion and centered around the review of the previous week. It's a great question. Any other questions? And I will
and
say,
when we talk about week 1, week 2, I know when I printed out the thing for taking notes, it sounds like week 1 is actually next week of the actual course, right? This kind of
correct.
doesn't have a number. This is week 0.
Yeah, this is like our intro call. Okay. That's a good way to put it. Week 0.
Okay.
And maybe that's one suggestion we'll make to Mark here, since he's on the call, is adding a week 0 to that little form.
I think that's a good idea.
Yeah. The other value that I really love about Faith and Finances is that they really create a community of learners, right? Where we're learning from each other. And at the same time, when we go into a Faith and Finances cohort, one of the things that I love is preserving the dignity in people in the classroom who oftentimes come in with money issues, and there is a lot of shame behind money. And for those of you all who have, I mean, Julie, I think maybe with all this experience too, you may have seen this in your classes where people are really, in the first couple of weeks, it's really hard for them to share about their finances, but as you build trust, as you build community with them, they start to open up over time. And part of the dynamic that I think Chalmers really did well in this andragogy of the classroom is more of this facilitator and, facilitating together. We are learning together in this process versus, I don't have an extra cup, but, full cup, empty cup, right? And working for a university, a lot of the times the andragogy is, I am the full cup as a professor and you are the student as an empty cup, and I'm pouring all my water into this empty cup. However, that's not true, because every student comes with lived experience. They have real life experience. And so we want to build on that. And for a lot of our participants, this is, in reality, I've seen this many times. This is the first time they've really been, I would say, empowered to think of their lived experience as an asset in their financial management. And that goes a long way. And so culturally, I will say that sometimes it's a little bit difficult working in some context, right? Because culturally, even though I am Hispanic, right, and in my Hispanic culture, everyone's usually late to everything. Things are a little bit more relaxed, and I'm a little bit of the opposite to my culture, right? So when I go back to work with my culture, and say it takes 2 or 3 weeks or even a little bit longer to say why aren't they making progress, it just takes, some people take a little bit longer. And so I think part of our process here as we walk with people is also understanding some people might take a little bit longer, but we are in this journey with them together. And that's why I say this community of learner process, we are walking with them. And it's not, hey, here's talking head at the front of the room and you learning. And the other piece is there's a lot of humor and skits in this process to get people up and moving. So I think that's part of what I really enjoy. And I would make a distinction, having been involved, before with other programs like Dave Ramsey or Crown Ministry or other programs that you may have heard. I don't know if I should be saying this with Chalmers here, right? But again, I make this distinction, especially for you all who are in churches and someone like Bonnie who's evaluating the program, is a lot of the time those programs are built for middle class, upper middle class, usually more white cultured, I would say, written learner types where they're watching videos, they're going through PowerPoints, and versus in my context, we work with a lot of low to moderate income populations. And so pressing a video and pressing play for an hour doesn't really always work. And I mean, you think of Dave, and yeah, one of the questions he poses is, what would you do with the $10,000 investment? And I'm working with folks who I'm working really hard with to create a $200 emergency savings account. And so that culturally competent language has been taken very seriously by Chalmers. And that's why we've used Chalmers for almost a decade, because of the context that we work in. So I make that distinction for you all because there are no PowerPoints in Faith and Finances. There are no videos. And so again, everything is in the classroom. Everything is, I say, more oral based, as most low to moderate income populations learn best is orally, right? Through stories, through talking with each other, to building with, to learning in community with each other. So all that to say is, I think I've said enough here. Any questions on anything I've mentioned here? I'm just hoping to cast vision to you all as to what we're going and what you got yourself into. All right.
Well, what you just described is exactly, I mean, yeah, we did the Ramsey thing, and it's wonderful for the audience it's designed for. But yeah, it's not reasonable for someone who says, I don't know if I have enough money for gas next week. You have you have folks who are really struggling, but not in the same way. But the other thing you said that I can resonate with is every single session that I went through, I was able to learn from the people who were there. So yeah, it wasn't just a pouring out.
Absolutely.
I did have kind of a question. One of the things I saw in what I was looking at this morning, it talked about using a flip chart.
Yes.
And is there an advantage to the flip chart over just having like a whiteboard? Because I think most of our classrooms have whiteboards in them.
Yeah, and that's a great question. Both are great. Part of what I love about the flip chart is you can actually save the flip charts and then put them up on the wall throughout sessions, right? The downside of the whiteboard is you erase it and then you have to write it over and over again, or you're taking things down. There are some helpful flip charts like the 2 key themes of faith and finances, which we'll talk about soon, that we encourage to always keep up, plus some general guidelines for the classroom. Some people say, hey, let's employ the Vegas rule here. What we talk about in the classroom stays in the classroom. Some people say no phone, right? There's a list of protocols, if you will. And then as you're going week to week, there's stuff you're working through that maybe you want to come back to next week in week 2. Again, because there are no PowerPoints or such, however, visuals still help in the process. So I really enjoy the flip chart process.
Okay.
But again, that totally is up to you all. I would definitely recommend flip charts personally.
Thank you.
And again, you save them week after week, which by the end of it, you have like 20 or 30 posters, right, that you're putting up every week. So there is a little bit of setup time to consider. However, it's helpful to not have to recreate those every single time.
Carlos, this is Steve. I really appreciate the cultural sensitivity you're speaking of, and I'm sure I have a great deal of to learn there, and some things to unlearn there too, myself from my background. I'm curious. I mean, I love the shalom.
Mhm.
Biblical justice theme that pervades the Chalmer and so many things that you guys are about. I'm curious about how some of the national conversation about what some people think justice is in sense of redistribution, or how whether that will enter into any of our training. I know it's a very complicated matter, and I'm certainly no expert on it, but I'm just curious if Chalmers has a point of view on this.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd necessarily assign this to Chalmers, but I will say that a lot of the content and the learning over time, there is even on week 3 something called It's Complicated, right? And we're going to jump into what does biblical justice and a prayer for our land look like. We're going to talk about everything from, hey, what does a family financial tree look like in our own families, and how has that influenced our view on money and how we manage money. By the way, I will say I use that with my wife, and it was one of the most difficult things we've done in our marriage when we talk about why we manage finances the way we do. But there will actually be a discussion as well under both systemic and individual sin and how that's so pervasive in our culture today. I will say a lot of the work that I do personally here at their center is shalom centered. We always lean on theologian Perry Yoder's words is restoring things to the way God intended them to be in people, for people, and between people. And so I feel like Ray Bakke said this better. On the path to heaven, all we have is heaven, right? Because we are experiencing heaven in that process as we, again, are reconciled to God. So all that to say is, in terms of a stance, I wouldn't necessarily speak to one. I don't directly work for the Chalmers Center, but I serve with the Chalmers Center. But just giving you that context of everything we do here is shalom centered. We choose Chalmers over any other ministry because of how competent they are and how well they understand that poverty isn't simply something that you can pray and it'll go away, or something that you can manage and it'll, right? There's so much more that goes into that.
Thank you.
Of course. By the way, Steve, I see your question here. I don't think it's too late
Very
for you
thoughtful.
to join the Friday one. Sorry if we're not fun enough for you, Steve. But I'll ask if it's still possible to move you over to the Friday cohort. Matt Cedor, who does that cohort, is fantastic as well.
It's just a better time, but I don't want to lose this group.
No, I totally get it, man. By the way, I also your second question, I'd be curious for those who oversee church benevolent funds or the like, is there any kind of expectation of payback or pay forward funds? Oh man, that's a loaded question, Steve, because on one end, there's a theology for some denominations. On other ends, there is kind of, hey, where are we at in terms of, community, stakeholder buy-in, right? It's a hard one when it comes to benevolence, like at my church, and I'll throw this out to the group, right? There is necessarily no expectation to pay it back, but we do talk a lot about generosity and how much it is a gift and just an experience with God and being able to be generous, just as He is generous to us. We won't necessarily always, we won't say, hey, now you have to pay this back through tithing or whatever. But again, we also know that that generosity and giving joyfully is both biblically centered and something that is an experience with God as much as with building community with others. I don't know if anyone else has a thought to Steve's question there.
I can address our situation in the Compass Initiative. We have we give $5,000 matching grants to pastors, and the match is what their church raises for them. So the church raises 5,000, we will match 5,000, and then they can use that to pay on debt, to try to get out of debt, or student loans. That's a major issue for pastors, or to put into their retirement accounts. So we don't require them to pay anything back other than that they need to work with a church and talk about finances and get those conversations going, which can be a huge challenge. But we see the benefit after they go through some training on just basic finances, and they get that money to pay off debt. And I just get these stories back from participants who just say, this has changed our life, changed our ministry. We feel like we can be generous in ways that we never were before. So that theme of generosity, as you said, Carlos, is I think what I see as the reward for the greater church and the greater community and world. Mm-hmm. At least, from our perspective, when we're trying to really invest in pastors to become more financially literate and sound.
That's beautifully stated, and the matching concept, I guess, breeds some skin in the game, some mutual accountability. And I realize that is a tough question I'm throwing out there, and we're in our formative stage. We want members of our success funds to be able to draw funds to buy tools that can be income producing or vocational training that will generate income. It likely will be a gift. It's not intended to be a loan. And yet there's this sense of, okay, since we envision you being able to raise income from some of this, what responsibility would we want them to have to pay it forward, more likely, not so much pay it back, but it not unlike some of the savings funds that Hope International and others do. So we're just still muddling toward what is the right mix for being a catalyst to provide capital without creating dependency. And so that's why I'm taking the class, because I've got a lot to learn in that space. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, the only other final thing that I would mention, Steve, on one end, I've had a mentor say, we talk about Jesus, and Matthew said, the poor you will always have with you. And you find that, he was citing a catchphrase from Deuteronomy in that time, that he knew most of the people in that time knew what the Torah was saying, where, there will always be poor with you in your land, brothers and sisters. But my call to you is to have your hand open wide and be generous so that there is no one in need in your land. And so I come back to, and again, theology, I cannot say different denominations will have different theology around this, right? But I've had a mentor in the past mention that our call is to be generous. The rest of it is up to the relationship between that person and God and what they do from there. And so once we start putting qualifiers into what we're doing, that really starts to muddle the work that because there's conflict of interest there is essentially what I've been told in the past. And I'm very much on that boat as well. But again, that isn't to say you should do this or that. This is just what influences the work that we do here.
Thank you.
Yeah. But these are great questions. Steve, I think you've already are challenging us early to be thinking about why are we in this space? How does that influence how we're going to be working on our ministries, our programs going forward? I do want to honor our time. I'm happy to take the full hour as well if there's more discussion, but I did mention to you that this should be only a 30 or 45-minute call. But you guys came in guns a-blazing, ready to chat here, so I'm all for it. Any other questions that are hanging out in space here?
I just had one question. If we have to miss a class, we can just watch the recorded video.
Yep, and you mean this weekly check-in, Tasha?
Yeah, well, it's gonna be the 23rd. I have conference.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. Yeah, if you know that I am recording these, and then I'll upload them onto the Pathright for you to review as well.
Okay.
It's a great question. So I will say that while these aren't fully required in the process, I like I say in my other courses in entrepreneurship and such, like if you choose not to do these, I don't know why you signed up for the program if you're not going to take advantage of everything offered to you in this process. Tasha, I'm not saying this towards you, by the way, but you bring this up to in general, because I have had people in previous cohorts who sign up but don't come through the weekly check-ins, is that they're actually the ones who usually end up struggling in the program or don't end up completing it. So all that to say is I really encourage our weekly check-ins, but if you do miss, know that they are being recorded and I will upload those to on YouTube and into the platform. But again, you can always schedule some time with me if you want to catch up on something if you do miss, or if you simply want to chat through something else. But that's a great question. Any other questions, y'all? Susan?
I'm excited.
I was going to ask a question as far as we have a gentleman who's in our group that's going to be an ally that is a dyed-in-the-wool Dave Ramsey, and he is wealthy.
Mhm.
How do I get him to buy into fully the concept of faith and finances without hitting him over the head?
Yeah. Well, you know, I have folks in some churches who one semester do Dave Ramsey and another that do faith and finances, because they are very much set up for different context.
Right.
I wouldn't say you necessarily have to make them a faith and finances disciple, but very much get them to understand the cultural competency of both programs and who they're for. This has been a hard conversation in some of our wealthier churches as well, because they want to use faith and finances, and though it does work for, I mean, we've seen it used well with more affluent populations. Again, the context is low to moderate income populations.
Right.
And so a lot of the examples are there. So some of them come to realize maybe Ramsey is a better fit for some of the folks that we serve. So I wouldn't necessarily say you need to hit them over the head with it, or but I very much would say the more you can share on some of this learning process. The other reality is proximity to the poor is very important in this process, where if someone's never worked with someone in poverty before and they come in like, hey, I'm going to fix your financial situation so that, you know, you are, by the end of these 12 weeks, you are no longer in poverty. It's not always necessarily realistic, but I have had folks that come into our programs as allies like that and as facilitators. And so we need to slow them down a little bit.
Okay.
Susan, a thought I had earlier, because, you know, the financial piece is what I have taught before. And in this class, it sounds like we're going to be talking about setting up a $200 emergency fund. That's getting in the neighborhood of what they pay to attend the Dave Ramsey class, right? So it's like, we are definitely talking about a completely different group of people here, where what Dave, well, it's not bad what he talks about. And it, you know, I've seen people who were really struggling financially, who were middle, upper class because of the debt and everything else. But they weren't necessarily worried about making the mortgage payment the next month,
Correct.
if that makes sense. It's
Yeah.
like, so it's the same principles. I think he'll find that the principles are very similar, but that it's aimed at a different group of people who, what Dave talks about over here is just, that's not attainable for them. It's outside
Correct.
of their reach.
Right.
So some of those things might help him see. We're not saying anything different. I mean, we're not going to tell him to go use charge cards to get by. I don't envision that, right, Carlos?
No.
So, I don't think he's going to have to have a big stretch to understand what we're doing here.
That's really
Okay.
At least I hope that's the case.
And I would say we set up our work here to combat the payday lending issue in our city. Right? There's more payday lenders than Starbucks and McDonald's combined in Fresno.
Right.
That's amazing.
And
That's amazing.
so that's a
And
big
yet Dave
issue.
has no use for them either.
Yeah.
So.
Absolutely. But again, like Julie says, I don't think he'll argue any of the principles that are being taught through here. And everything, here's the other reality that I'll mention to you is we entered in, with to work with the local Fresno Housing Authority here. And we do faith and finances in 5 Section 8 housing complexes. And when we started the conversation with them, we let them know, like, hey, this is a faith-centered program. And they're like, yeah, we worked with faith groups. It's like, no, like this is a biblically centered program. Scripture is integrated into the program. And what they said always blows my mind, but they said, we feel like faith is what's missing in these programs. Because their data was starting to track that the faith-based programs and faith-based groups that worked with, people completed those programs and had success in those versus the ones that were not. And what they found is that folks who usually were in low to moderate income contacts, those who essentially are their clients, were really strong believers, right? They had a really strong faith in their poverty context. And so this went a long way for them, if you will. And so I just mentioned that again, because some of you will use it in your churches, in your nonprofits, in your businesses, something to consider when working with different contexts. That's
Great.
a great question, Susan. All right, I think we have time for maybe one final question, if anybody wants to take it. All right. So if not, I will say thank you for a great week 1 intro. It's really great to meet you all. Steve, I'll CC you on an email that I send to the Chalmers Center admin here and see if we can switch you over to the Friday cohort. We'll be sad to miss you here, but yeah, hope we get that done for you. But if anything, let me go ahead and pray for our group and we'll close our time together. Heavenly Father, thank you again for this Monday. Thank you for this almost hour that we've gotten to spend together, Lord, as you connect different parts of the United States together, Lord. I pray for each of us on this call, our families, our communities, our churches, our ministries, Lord. Bless us and the work that you've called each and every one of us to. Let us know that the good work you are doing in and through us continues to bring a smile to your face, Lord. And may we shine that light in your communities as we continue our work, Lord. So as we dive into faith and finances and what it means to take this program and a financial education program into our ministries, Lord, may you bless this process. May you encourage us to dig deeper, Lord, and again, hear your spirit and being sensitive to your spirit as it may be leading us. I pray for what faith and finances may do in our communities ahead of time, the people will touch, the communities that will change, the churches that will come alongside and be impacted as well, Lord. So be with us in this time. We're thankful again for this space, Lord. We love you. We give you thanks. Amen.
Amen.
All right, friends, go in peace. I look forward to seeing you all next week. Thank you.
Thanks, Carlos.
Thank you,
Aye.
Carlos.